afternoon, good evening, good day, and good morning, Blurtsters, wherever you are around the world. You are listening to the Blurt.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, the Turrbal people of Yuggera land, as well as the Woiwurrung people of the Wurundjeri land. We recognise their continued connection to the land and waters of this beautiful place, and acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. We respect all Turrbal and Woiwurrung elders and ancestors, and any First Nations people here today.
Good evening. You are with the Kegsta on the new Blurt. I am the host of the new Blurt, and if you've never listened to the new Blurt before, well, it's really hard to explain, but we have many segments we talk about, and tonight we are talking about a couple of crackers. One is Blurt On Politics, and we have a fantastic recorded interview with Marija Taflaga, Dr Marija Taflaga to you, excuse me, Director of Political Sciences, Social Sciences at the Australian National University. And she's also an esteemed part of the Democracy Sausage podcast, if you've ever tuned into that one with Mark Kenny, which is a particularly good one. He has some fantastic guests as well. So we're very, very lucky to have Marija back. And you're very lucky to have her live as well. Well, live-ish. Probably around about, I don't know, what is it now? 11 past, okay. So it's going to be around about probably 20 past 8. Marija will pop on. And then we'll end the rest of the show with great people that did stuff. And if you've ever listened to the show before, you'll know that that is a time where we say who was good, who did something particularly interesting and that, you know, might have changed people's lives out there, or at least very noteworthy. And tonight we have a guy called Maurice Flitcroft. I will not say any more about that. Apart from he was a professional golfer and he played in a British Open in 1976. More story of that to come. And the other great person that did something was Professor Graham Clark. And I must confess, I don't know enough or anything about Professor Graham Clark, but Wencee, our esteemed co-host, will definitely fill us in and let us know what's happening there. I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri country, Kulin Nation of the Woiwurrung people. Sovereignty was never ceded, always has been, and always will be Aboriginal land. I think now is probably a really good time to bring in our esteemed co-host. Goes by the name of Wencee.
Settle down, settle down. Okay, settle down.
The robotic arm. I like that. Very good. Very good. Very nice. Very nice.
How are you, my young friend?
I'm very good, mate. How are you going? Are you still a bit dazed and confused up there, considering we've gone forward an hour, as
Yes.
sort of the show title alludes to?
Yes, my biggest bugbear of the whole time I've been here in Queensland is we don't have daylight savings. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When are we going to get it?
Yeah, no, you're not a happy camper about that, are you?
No.
Explain to me why. What is it that really irks you about it?
Well, there's many things. One is 4 a.m. brightness. The sun comes up early here. And so without daylight savings, it's bloody bright at 4:30 in the morning. So
is it really? Is the sunlight just totally shining at 4 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah, around that time it's already getting bright and light seeping in through the bedroom window and all that.
That's far too bright for me at 4 a.m.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. That's number one. Number two, it would be so much nicer if it was lighter at the end of the day, so we could do more things in the daylights after work, like going to restaurants and things like that, which is something we all ex-Melburnians do quite a lot.
And see what you're eating.
Yes, exactly. Number three, you can't live tweet TV shows anymore because they're all an hour behind, which really sucks.
That's very, very true. And and I heard you had trouble watching The Insiders as well on the ABC on Sunday morning.
Yes, I tuned in at 9 o'clock to watch it, and we turned on ABC 24, and we caught the tail end of it. I went, damn you, daylight savings!
It's got me again. It's got me again. I don't know.
On the positive front, hopefully, the Lord Mayor of Brisbane City Council is asking the State Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, to please bring up a new referendum for daylight savings. So,
really?
Yeah, wow. Yeah. So I haven't read the details, but he believes that it could save us $4 billion in the southeast Queensland area.
Well, you've said in the title that we've got 5 time zones, and I'm quite amazed by that. I thought we only really had 2. Well, it was like, nearly every other state 2022, and then Queensland 1965. I mean,
pretty much.
I don't know.
Where's the boom tish? Yes. So
bit slow.
There we go. So non-daylight savings, there's 3 time zones.
Non-daylight savings. So I know it's Northern Territory,
and
Queensland,
South Australia.
Oh, because they're half an hour, aren't they?
Yeah, they're half an hour behind. Then you've got the eastern side.
Western Australia.
And then West Australia. So you've got the 3 time zones.
Oh, yeah, there is 5. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So now with daylight savings, we don't move. South Australia moves ahead by an hour, and Northern Territory stays the same. So there's still...
So half an hour. So that means that... Okay, so does that mean... no. Okay. Because South Australia moved...
forward
a decade ahead. No,
yes.
Because they moved an hour ahead. We're still only half an hour
ahead. You guys are still half an hour ahead of South Australia.
Are we?
But yes,
I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
No. Okay. To Victorians, South Australia's half an hour behind. To to Queenslanders, us here in Queensland. Now, South Australia is half an hour ahead of us. So wrap your head around that.
No, it's too hard. It's too hard. All I can say is it's 8 o'clock here at the moment. I'm assuming it's 7 o'clock there.
7:15, but which decade are we in?
Yes. Well, that is the question. Actually, talking about that, I mean, you had a really good win. The Greens had a really good win the last election. What have you been getting? Have you been getting anything from them, or?
No, not yet. They're still quite feet to the ground. They're still, especially our local member, Libby Watson Brown. She's doing a lot of pop-up offices around the electorate and doing a lot of face-to-face community work and things like that. So she's quite involved. I know Max Chandler Mayer is also doing similar things in his electorate. And Stephen Bates is doing a lot. And speaking of Stephen Bates, not the weekend just gone, but the weekend before, there was the Brisbane Pride March in Brisbane on the Saturday. And I and my partner, we participated in that march.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and Stephen Bates was there heading the Greens, wouldn't call it a float, but just the group of people that had a big rainbow flag they were carrying above themselves or above their heads, which apparently was about 40 years old, that flag. So it's got a bit of history apparently from the times when the LGBTQI community weren't considered part of the community or society. So yeah, so Stephen Bates was at the head of that group, and yeah, it's quite interesting.
And how many people do you think were marching?
Oh, I reckon at least 5,000 or 10,000.
Wow, that's a few.
Yeah, it went for at least a kilometre long. I would have thought it was pretty far. And then they all conquered.
Sorry.
And they all finished at one of the parks near South Bank called Musgrave Park. And they had a big pride fair and music and shows and stalls and merch that they were giving away and things like that. Organisations like the AFP were there. Who else was there? Woolies was there.
Were they there just to keep order?
No. Promoting. Yeah, they marched in as well, and they had representatives behind the stalls and things like that. And then you had the various organisations, clubs that support LGBTQI or mental health or other concerns that they were imparting with information, leaflets and booklets and stuff. So, yeah, it's entertaining, informational. Is that a word?
Informational. Yeah. Well, informative. I think that's what you.
Informative is probably the better word. Yes. Yeah. So it's really good.
No, go for it. Sorry.
No, that's it.
No, I was just going to say you mentioned mental health in there, and that's a really good, not necessarily a segue, but it's a really good impetus for us just to thank Mark Basiti from Dancing with the Black Dog for being on our show last week.
Yeah.
And thanks to you for organising it. And obviously it'll be excellent to have him back at some stage as well. And
absolutely.
And hopefully with his blog, he's still being able to help people. And I hope anyone who's ever listened to the new Blurt and they do have any issues, any sort of mental health questions or issues of any kind or whatever, one could listen to that podcast, take something from it, and fantastic with all the numbers down there, and be able to know sort of where to turn to when sometimes you don't. So
exactly.
But one thing I did want to say though, somewhere where you definitely don't want to turn to is CPAC Australia. Now, CPAC Australia is the Conservative Political Active Conference or something. Action. That's what A stands for. Okay. Not assholes, but action.
You stole the words out of my mouth.
So I thought that if we're going to be fair and balanced on this show, very much like Fox News is, but we're on the other end, I thought we should play just a little bit of this shit to see what people would be getting into if they were to actually go to this absolute waste of money, time, effort, and breath. But that's obviously only my humble opinion. But I think I speak for you as well.
Yes.
So, people, enjoy this next 4 minutes, and if it's too bad, don't worry, I will take it off.
Yeah.
But here we go.
And tune back into the show in 4 minutes if you don't.
Yeah, that's it, if you want to tune.
It's musical fanfare. And guests who...
Oh, sorry, we've got a blah blah.
Flock to hear speakers' thoughts on wokeism, cancel culture, gender pronouns, climate denial, and other gripes.
The Hunter Biden laptop scandal. Woke identity politics.
I was absolutely right.
I think he meant wank identity politics.
Oh, God. I thought we got rid of it.
Sponsors of free Margaret Thatcher coffee mugs if you join the Institute of Public Affairs, and the chance to have your photo taken with none other than Donald Trump's cardboard cutouts.
Seriously?
Outside, angry anti-CPAC protesters threatened to storm the building, claiming
I like these people.
Ideas of inequality and bigotry.
In making attempts to try to get into the International Convention Centre.
Inside, a cacophony of conservative thinking.
We believe in the family.
We are in a war against authoritarianism.
Champions of common sense.
Just full of shit.
Aren't they?
Many of the speakers, including former PM Tony Abbott, chose the
that.
platform to cast doubt on the government's proposed Indigenous voice to Parliament.
If Indigenous people are underrepresented, more should be elected to the Parliament.
The voice is wrong. The only way we win is by not having the vote to begin with.
The event concluded today.
Look how old they are. Check out how old that audience were. Check out how old they are.
Now you know I bullshit. Good job,
No,
Tina.
she's full of
And
bullshit.
Senator Malcolm
She's
Reed.
World War.
He's the worst of them all.
They've
great
got the
resist.
dumbest
So
shits
did
ever.
CPAC Australia edition win
Like,
over any new hearts and minds?
That
be fair, the
guy
mugs
is
look
just a
pretty-
toothless
I am
turd.
obviously
Seriously.
completely out of step.
Man, my
Yes,
eyes and
yes,
ear holes are
this is
really
right.
sore right now. Really hurting.
Also, that crikey, Cam Wilson was at the conference.
Oh, yes.
yeah,
So
yes.
I've heard
A little
this. I've heard this.
Cam, this conference comes at a time when the Conservative.
Actually, no more of that. But you
we
can
get
catch
it.
up. Yeah, you can catch up with that article on Cam Wilson from Crikey, and I think you can read the article for free. So
Okay, good. They occasionally do let out some free articles.
yeah, I'm
Out
pretty
of the
sure that
paywall.
one. I'm pretty sure that one is one. So, but
frightening.
But yeah, it is frightening. It's absolutely horrible. And
I do remember reading. I think it was it Tina McQueen or one of them saying, "We're glad we got rid of those lefty liberals at the last election." So I'm assuming she was referring to Frydenberg.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else? Lost
Even Morrison. Even Morrison.
Yeah.
They count him as a moderate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. They count him worse than the Labor Party.
Amazing.
So,
Unless they have some
eat
sense.
their own. They eat their own. There's no
They
doubt
do.
about it. I hope they keep eating them. Just keep chewing. Keep going where you're going, because what they should be called is the Australian Liberal Party moving closer and closer to irrelevance.
Fingers crossed. I don't think that'll ever happen, but hopefully it'll be at least three more elections before they even have a chance of winning.
Yeah, I know. Everything they stand for is just crap.
Yeah.
But anyway, something that definitely is not crap, and we do absolutely promote it on the show, is the Australian Institute. So let's go to a quick break from Ebony Bennett, and then we'll be back with Blurt on Politics.
The Australian Institute produces high-quality research that has real-world impact, whether it's revealing the $10.3 billion in fossil fuel subsidies provided by federal and state governments last year, or our long-standing research advocating for a federal anti-corruption commission with real teeth. We change minds. To donate, head on over to australiainstitute.org.au.
As the sting says, Blurt on Politics. Let's get ready to rumble.
About in a do yourself a favor segment of the best and, as we talked about, worst podcast, but most of the time, Wencee, it's pretty much always good ones, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't think we reviewed a bad one yet.
No, I don't think so either. So, and Maria is a big part of that podcast, and so we're very lucky to have her back on. She's the director of social studies and political studies at the Australian National University, and amongst other things, she's a very busy person with a very busy child as well. So, good evening.
Evening. Hi, guys.
Maria.
Thanks for having me on. I'm sure
Hello,
there has
welcome
been
back.
a bad episode of Democracy Sausage. You know, I mean, you just have to try harder. Yeah. So, no.
I'll make sure I'll make sure I send this episode straight to Mark. Yes, good evening. Absolute pleasure to have you again, Maria, and thank you very much for your time. So we thought we might start on your thoughts on the ICAC that they are looking at putting. I think they've actually put it through yesterday. Mark Dreyfus spoke about it. Now they just need to get it approved, I believe.
Yeah, so I guess the inner cynic in me is not at all surprised that the model that they have landed on isn't exactly Helen Haynes's model, right? Which was sort of considered to be a best practice kind of model. And I guess the most interesting kind of sticking point is around the sort of public hearing provision. So they've got like all of these stipulations around, you know, danger to the reputation of someone, you know, whether or not it would prejudice a trial, and a whole bunch of other kind of sort of common sense provisions. And then they've sort of added this grab all thing called like, whether or not there are exceptional circumstances, which is, of course, as vague as it could possibly be. And this sort of exceptional circumstances test is probably almost certainly likely to then become the subject of a legal case. And we're very likely to have a situation where eventually the High Court will rule on what an exceptional circumstance is. And it sort of seems kind of silly and seems to be borrowing the absolute worst things from Victoria's ICAC system, which is, is not considered to be the best anti-corruption model out there. And so it would be fascinating to kind of see what this looks like at the end of its sort of run through the parliament, because it kind of looks like perhaps, well, I mean, why have they kind of put this in there? It sort of is a strange thing to put with all the sort of specific kind of conditions that they have on the one side. Is this to get a deal with the coalition? And you would think that Labor would prefer to do that, right? Because they kind of have similar interests. But
to not get caught, you mean?
Exactly, right? Because they're governments, they're parties of government, right? So they're far more likely to end up on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, blood. Like if we all go back to the glorious days of the Rudd government, like we might, you might have forgotten that Craig Thompson.
Oh yes.
That story about Craig Thompson and the credit cards and hookers and all of that,
That's right.
like that was actually broken before Gillard became, perhaps before she became Prime Minister, but definitely before the 2010 election. And it was sort of like Game of Thrones style, like this sort of sleeper issue that was set up in season 1, episode 7, and then popped up in season 3, episode 2, and just killed someone, right? So it's not like, and Anthony Albanese, of course, was leader of the House. And if you recall, right, there was that attempt by Tony Abbott and Christopher Pyne to run out of the chamber before the doors were locked, right? Yes, and Pyne escaped, of course, and Abbott, I think, ended up basically smashing into a locked door and was stuck and was forced to accept the tainted vote of Craig Thompson. And this is only tangentially relevant to the point, but I guess my point is that.
Tangential relevance. We're all about that here.
Well, that's right.
On the new post.
Exactly. But I guess that government, a lot of them have searing memories of the havoc that corruption inquiries can cause, and I guess in the case of Labor, right, it's sort of like a battle of wills between the good angel and the bad angel, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So.
Oh, it's true, because I mean they still got problems with the New South Wales Labor Party. I think wasn't there a person that made sort of some remark in New South Wales part of the Labor Party that wasn't particularly in line. Yeah, it wasn't in line with the federal sort of stand on things.
Yeah, well, that's that doesn't surprise me. I mean, if the different federal and state branches of these parties, they don't always have the same interests, and I mean, and if you actually kind of look at the New South Wales branches of all the Labor, the Greens, Liberal Party, there's something about Sydney and the way politics is done in Sydney that these party machines, the politics there is really vicious, I think that would actually be a really fascinating political geography kind of set of research. Is there something about the sort of geographical way that Sydney really kind of silos people into their parts of Sydney that potentially might be driving this, as opposed to cities that are kind of built on grids where everyone kind of comes into the centre? I think this would be difficult to measure, but I'm putting that challenge out there to future PhD candidates. Work out how to measure this, guys, and tell me the answer. So, yeah,
we're all fussing to know.
Yes.
Sydney was sort of based on the rum core, wasn't it? Years and years ago. And that sort of tone, that sort of way of doing business and that whole sort of personalities never really changed. It's just sort of manifested itself, in a bit of more of an expanded way. But
I think that's like we could definitely make this argument, and Melburnians would be very happy to make this argument about
yes,
sort of
that's true.
criminal tendencies of the New South Wales our colleagues, the hustlers up north, but the refined, wealthy, marvelous Melbourne types. So
that's very, very true. Free settlement down here, but no, what I wanted to talk about, we haven't really heard very much from. Well, we don't hear anything hardly from the opposition because they don't say anything of any real relevance. But the actual the Teals and the Greens are saying a lot at this stage. I mean, has Labor ever thought about maybe trying to sort of appeal to them a little bit more? I mean, wouldn't that make a little bit of sense considering how the election did actually go?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, okay, so I guess I'd say two things about this. I'm sure they do know that, and there'd be people who are building relationships with the Teals, and there'll be like that kind of going on in the background. But then there's also sort of like the theatrical level of politics, right? And I think Labor seems to be kind of that's kind of the meta text of a lot of what they kind of say, like, because ultimately as a party they are, broadly speaking, in policy terms, quite a bit more progressive than, say, the median voter. And someone like Albo, who's from the left faction, I think he is also kind of thinks about this and has been in politics a long time. And so I think for them, in many ways, like being seen to, be like forced into some decisions kind of suits them, right? And also with like the fact that the lower house has become a bit more kind of complicated, right? In the sense that there are more places to kind of build coalitions or potential coalitions. No one ever knows what's going to happen in politics. Maybe someone will die, or someone, another Craig Thompson will emerge, threatening the government's majority. So there's more kinds of ways for them to kind of build coalitions, and they also kind of, I guess, do have to think long term towards the next election. They really need the Teals to keep blocking the Liberal Party, because because it's not inconceivable that the coalition actually claims some Labor outer suburban seats, right? Because that's the kind of politics that's the Dutton strategy. That's what he's banking on. Whether or not he can actually flip these long-term Labor seats, especially in the short term, remains to be seen, like in 3 years' time. But maybe in 10 years' time, maybe. I don't know, right? But yes, I mean, I think the tax cuts, right? The tax cuts, like that's, I think, an area in which, like, I'm sure many of them kind of know that the problems that's sticking with the stage 3 tax cuts for the budget are really terrible, right? Yeah.
But Labor don't want to break a promise, which is their argument.
Exactly, right. And again, it's the sort of like, if they do decide to break the promise, they'll, it'd be that theater of being seen to be dragged by circumstance, right? I mean, like, if you look at how John Howard sort of ended up constructing his GST campaign, like, he said he would never ever have a GST, and then in the end, like, he was sort of presented it to the Australian people as like, a necessary reform, and that one that he would sort of take to the election. Like, whether or not Labor will do that, well, that remains to be seen. But if they're going to do that, it's going to, there's going to be, look for the pantomime. It's going to be a lot of pantomime. We really didn't want to, but circumstances were such, So go on.
I was just going to say, surely they can just adjust that tax, stage 3 tax cut. to suit the current climate, not do it in full, but just modify it a little bit and still not break their promise.
Well, I imagine that they will end up doing something like that. Like maybe they will delay it. Maybe they will bring in some other kind of levy. I mean, you know what? Like from my perspective as like someone that would really kind of like to see you know, a really robust kind of conversation. It'd be great if they just said, well, this is actually terrible policy and we cannot afford it. And we need to have a conversation about what we want this country to look like. And we had this Henry tax review that is just sitting there that we should like seek to kind of implement. Let's have a you know, a bona fide conversation. But I'm not convinced that will happen without, you know, yet another giant exogenous shock like a Ukraine war or World War III or something like that to kind of really, I think without events, I don't think Labor will take those risks. And you know, they're interesting in the sense of where they're structuring this two-term strategy. Yeah.
It's hilarious. It is hilarious, actually, because as you know, they never wanted to pass the 243. In fact, they voted against it. And then I think there were certain amendments. And then in the end, they voted for it because they didn't want to stand in its way, as it were. And they said it was bad policy from the start, but yet they're going, but it was a promise. But it was terrible policy. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, well, I mean, Albo at the time, he you know, because he's getting a lot of flack from really like angry Labor people who are furious with him, and you know they just lost that election, and you know this is like, and it is, you know, I mean it was such a risky policy move on the federal, on the coalition government's side, and like frankly, had they had won this election, like dealing with the fiscal shit sandwich, right, would have been difficult for them too, right, because eventually, like, there's too many concessions in the budget that favor wealth, basically, and that's their constituency. Like, something's got to give. You can't keep giving income taxes, and you know, expanding the size of the state, which is what the coalition government has actually been doing for 10 years, or had previously been doing. But yeah, I mean, Albo sort of said, "Oh, you know, watch the play," which I really hate it when politicians talk about things in these kinds of gamified kind of ways. But yeah, they did. They made the strategic decision that they didn't want to give Scott Morrison the stick of these guys don't believe in giving you a tax cut, which, you know, was, I mean, I think that's the thing about when you're in opposition, like you're really structurally at a huge disadvantage. And so it is spineless. Like, I think there's no other word for it, but it is understandable. It's sort of like, you know, well, someone, like, we have an explanation for why someone is being weird or a jerk, but is it an excuse? Well, not necessarily. And I think that's kind of where Labor has landed on this. And they are, I mean, like, you know, they're all still so shell-shocked by the Gillard stuff that they, you know, I mean, I guess that's the thing that I worry about is, like, from a public policy sense, like, are they so fixated on the last war that they actually don't adjust to circumstances as they actually are, and by locking themselves into not breaking a promise, that they end up like driving the economy off a cliff or creating all other kinds of fiscal policy problems that they can't resolve, that they you know, can't deliver the promise, or they deliver the promise, but it's basically satisfies people who are unlikely to vote for them anyway, and piss off their own constituents who might teal or green or whatever. Like, you know, it's I mean, I think Albanese is a very strategic kind of thinker as opposed to a tactical thinker. So I'm kind of interested to sort of see where he actually lands on all of these things. But that is my kind of concern, that they
won't step up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think Albanese, like, as an opposition leader, was actually very good at sticking to the strategic line and and actually playing the terrain he was on. And I just hope that he continues to do that as Prime Minister so he can take advantage of opportunities that do arise. And he has kind of done that. Like, I mean, the government should be getting smashed for what is happening with prices and inflation. And they've actually been quite deft at like pivoting out of it. So, you know, and I guess we'll see with the budget. Go on.
Yeah, no, go for it. No.
Oh, no, that was it. That was it. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that, but I mean, the government's only been in for 4 months. We've sort of seen the sort of steps that Penny Wong's made with the Chinese ambassador, and I think the in the Pacific as well, the different ambassadors there, etc. It seems to be that she's making some good diplomatic relations in that area, which we didn't seem to have as much before.
Repairing, you mean?
The government. Sorry?
Repairing, you mean?
Yeah, correct. But the rest of the government as such, I mean, from a pure layman's perspective, it seems like they're sort of on the right track. They're trying to do the right things, but obviously this ICAC's really going to sort them out. As you said, the Helen Haynes model looks like it's being sort of diverted away from a little bit, which isn't very good news for a lot of people, especially Teal voters and Greens, and even obviously certain Labors as well, that want a proper, robust ICAC. But in your humble political science opinion, how do you think that it's faring after being in for 4 months? Are you seeing it's going in the right direction? I know we've got the 22 cents to come back on to the fuel excise this week, I think it is. And I mean, obviously that needed to happen. I mean, that was just a sugar hit, from the other side, et cetera, et cetera. So just wondered, your opinion on that, Mark.
Oh, okay. Look, I actually think the government is doing pretty well. But, they're basically crash landed into a blizzard in the middle of a flood, right? They had the energy fuel crisis thing. They've got a set of inflationary kind of pressures that are taking off. That to be blunt, there's limits to what they can do in the very short term. They've got all of this pent-up pressure from, essentially their people wanting them to sort of really push on a whole bunch of sort of social reforms. And then they've got these lessons that they've learned from their last time in office, which is it's better to nail down, 60% of what you want and then stretch, right? So I actually think the government is going slower is a good thing. They seem to be setting up conversations that I think they will build on. And I actually do think Albanese was quite good at this as opposition leader. He did set up a whole bunch of narratives around Morrison and the government that, was definitely not compelling or flashy. But over time, they just kept colouring in that picture, and that's the kind of dominant one. And I guess with the Teals, right? Okay, so I don't know, but I guess a cynical part of my brain says, well, they've put in this exceptional circumstances clause so that when they pull it out, the Teals can claim a victory, and the Teals can go to their constituents and say, those suspicious union backing Labor guys who you guys don't like because they're coming after your taxes. Well, we sorted them out, and we're still far more progressive and into climate change than Peter Dutton. So keep us, because we'll keep Labor from being too Labor, which would be the worst. It would be potentially for those people, right? Because they're always looking to expand the state and go after wealth and et cetera, et cetera. And so, that might be in many ways, I think so long as Labor lands a relatively sane policy and that comes out of the negotiation, they're creating space, if you think about it, for those. Yes, for those actors to prove their worth, right? And that's actually quite different, a different mode of politics that you see in political systems that have, coalition governments, like, so Merkel, for example, Angela Merkel of Germany, she was an expert in that sort of standing back, allowing everyone to kind of talk, say their piece, and then, potentially creating strategic space for like someone who's probably pushed something too far to like retreat to. And then she comes in and settles the deal at the end, and is in control of everything.
She's amazingly diplomatic, isn't she?
Well, yeah. So we could say, like, perhaps this is what Labor is doing, or perhaps Labor is, I don't know, being Labor and messing things up. Time will tell.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Wencee, did you have any questions for Mara while she's with us?
I think we sort of touched on it earlier with the Dutton and sort of
what he's sort of softening or not softening.
Yes, that's the word, softening on the ICAC. Is this a ploy on his side? We just talked about Labor playing their game. Is this his way of saying, look, I'm really not a tough guy, that ex-policeman type persona that I used to show everyone? Now I'm a nice guy, I'm going to settle and I can get to a consensus with Labor. Is that his ploy now with the ICAC and
the
way they're moving?
So I always got the impression...
I was just going to say, he covers his baseball bat with plush toys when he hits someone. But,
well, I guess I think I've always got the impression that Dutton wasn't as against an ICAC as perhaps Scott Morrison might have been, and other members of the government. And Dutton seems to be clearly a conservative with a capital C, and also a pragmatist. And I can actually see a lot of strategic value for him in supporting an ICAC for two reasons. Like, one, it's going to happen whether he wants it to happen or not. So why not be in control of the situation?
Yeah, exactly.
And so in political science, we have this theory called the cartel thesis, which is that in essence, political parties have captured the state. So they extract lots of funding and support from the state to kind of keep themselves fiscally solvent. They exclude themselves from the Privacy Act so they can harvest our data. They construct electoral law and regulations, which in other countries are far more extensive than ours. But even here, right, they construct like the voting system and funding laws as a way to kind of lock actors out. So, for example, that it's pretty much harder. I think you need now 1,500 people or 500 people, a lot of people to sign like a declaration that you're a political party. So, it makes it harder for competition to arise. So we call this the cartel party thesis, i.e. they act as cartels to lock out opponents. And the coalition and Labor being the two big older kind of gorillas, right? Like, even though they hate each other, they hate the others even more. So and so they'll collude to and so you could sort of see this, Dutton's participation in this as just that sort of big party self-interested behavior. He is a pragmatist, so he can see that this is going to happen whether he likes it or not. So why not get on board? And it also differentiates him from Scott Morrison, which, you could argue is the reason why the coalition lost the Teals, right? Whether or not that's the case is, the AES will probably hopefully be able to help us determine that, right? But it's certainly a convenient argument. And if you just say it's all about Scott Morrison, then you don't really have to change much about what the Liberal Party and the coalition's basic direction is, its fundamental set of beliefs, and the strategy that Peter Dutton is embarking on to sort of continue to target soft Labor voters in the outer suburbs makes a lot of sense, which suits his politics, right?
Yeah, and I think he's also trying to get back some of those Teal seats that he lost because they were so big on the integrity.
Yeah, though I do wonder how that will ultimately gel with the climate stuff. I mean, because I guess this is the thing, right? Like, ultimately, it's not clear to me whether or not the party understands what really happened with the Teals. It was kind of interesting, some of the sort of reporting about how the campaign was set up. It's kind of after the fact was kind of revealing, like, so the Teal seats, the coalition, their polling, they really had a hard time getting a good track on what was happening in the Teal seats. That none of the Teal seats were really in their overnight tracking poll, and apparently the contest was kind of narrowing in their polling against Labor, right? But they were completely blindsided by what happened in the Teal seats and what happened in Western Australia. So, you know, they had their own kind of polling kind of issues. And so I do actually wonder, like, do they actually understand why they're lost in the Teal seats? But also, like, the other question is, can the people that remain in the party and control it, well, like, can they actually even hear those arguments, you know? Like, so, and I guess so I think Dutton's strategy for softening himself is actually really to just say, well, I'm not going to change. I'm Peter Dutton, but I have a broader set of opinions outside of national security and immigration. And like when I am talking about social welfare or, I don't know, technology, I just sound less scary.
I've got like a diverse, different ways of saying no rather than just one.
Yeah. And I mean, in some ways, I think that's probably the best strategy, because I just it's true to him, and if it's not authentic, it won't work, right? But I also wonder, like, can he actually win a big enough coalition, given he is more conservative than the median voter by a reasonable degree. And you know, and the whole party is now based in Queensland. They pretty much own Queensland. There's not much for them to win back in Queensland, except for those 2 seats they lost to the Greens, and they lost them to the Greens, right? Like, that's just like, you know, that's wild. Like, I wonder if the Greens will hold those seats. Like, perhaps there'll be two Teal candidates that appear in those seats. You know, because the Greens are, like, when it comes to fiscal policy, you know, extravagant is, I guess, the polite way of putting it. And
well, they don't have to be anything else other than that, though, do they, Maria? Maria? It's not like they need to, you know, they don't have to answer to the general public, because they're never going to be, you know, the main party. So they can put stuff out there, and
that can be exactly.
Well, exactly. I mean, they can do that. Though, I mean, sometimes I think it's kind of an interesting, because, I mean, you know, there's a really big debate within the Greens, and it's to do with, like, how the party was constituted, right? Like, there's a green movement, green environmental movement, and then there was, like, the sort of socialist trots, and the balance is different in each state, but they kind of fuse together. And you can kind of see why the politics of that party is kind of the way it is. But, like, you know, other green parties around the world are far more, I suppose, fiscally mainstream, or that's not the right word, but, you know, but and part of it's to do with just the fact that, you know, these PR systems, and so the ability to influence the political system and have buy-in and become a coalition member and influence government is just simply greater. There's more opportunities there. But, you know, like, the German Greens is like the sort of leading example, where that Green Party sort of, like, gained a little concession, and, you know, Germany's basically shut down its nuclear industry. The Greens have been part of a government, and I think there are people in the Greens that are attracted to this and want to have that level of influence, and then there are people in the Greens who want to remain a protest party, and the Greens are kind of constantly reckoning or trying to work out what to do with this conundrum.
I think that is a fantastic and perfect place to leave that, Mara. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank
you. I think we might even, next time we catch up, maybe we'll talk a bit more extensively about the Greens and exactly what they are doing, because I'm sure there'll be a few things that have gone through the Parliament by then.
By then, yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
Yes. Oh, that'd be great.
So,
yes.
Well, thanks again so much, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much for your time. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Well, I would be back live.
I'm back.
Yes.
What a great interview that was.
It was a cracker. I hope anyone that gets to listen to it, probably on the pod, or even if you watch the view on demand afterwards, which is what I've sort of been seeing is happening more than live. But there are quite a few people watching afterwards, etc. And I've noticed that actually with many different podcasts, if they do it live, etc. A lot of people don't. Yeah, a lot of people don't tune in live. They view on demand. I suppose like you and I would, to be honest.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, yeah, that was a great interview with Dr. Marija Taflaga. Just before we go any further, as we did talk about at the start of the show, it is our 99th show. So what does that mean, Wencee?
We've come this far that we've got another 99 to go at least.
But what does that mean for next week?
For next week, do we have someone special coming on our show?
Well, we hope so. I hope so.
We have been talking about it for a few weeks now. We did lock him in a few weeks ago.
We did lock him in.
And we know where he lives, so be careful there, Mr. Dan.
Yeah. When you eventually get to listen. Yeah, so Mr. Dan, don't steal my billboard Illich, or I think it's Illich actually.
Illich, I think it is.
I need to get that right. Illich will be with us next week, and that is pretty bloody exciting, I've got to tell you.
Live.
Yes, live. So, yes. Tell your friends, get the popcorn out for that one. It should be fun. Dan's always fun. He's got lots of interesting things to say, and hopefully he'll give us a story why they didn't let him on the ABC and why they let him back.
He's always got projects on the go as well, so hopefully
yeah.
He'll tell us what he's up to these days, what he's doing after the election.
Absolutely, because as you know, that took so much of his time. So, but as we did say at the start of the show, we do have last segment of the night. So just before we do that, we might just do this.
Can't hear anything if you're playing something.
Yes, I was, and I shall again, which was this.
Hey, this is Hannah Melville Ray from the Australia Institute. I'm listening to the new Blurt with Wencee and the Kegsta, and you should be too. It's on Tuesday nights, live from around 8 p.m.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Hi, and welcome to Great People That Did Stuff.
So Great People That Did Stuff. I've got a quick funny one.
Go for it.
And this guy did do things. His name is Morris Flitcroft, and his claim to fame is that in 1976, at the age of 46, he decided that he was going to play in the British Open as a professional golfer.
Okay. At the age of 46.
At the age of 46, he'd never played golf before, ever.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. Never. Okay.
So the first round of golf he ever had was the first round he played at the British Open.
How did they let him in?
It's such a fantastic story. They let him in because when he was filling out the form, it said professional or amateur. And in those days, you're talking 76, so, there's no internet or any of that sort of stuff. So you just sort of tick a box and they trust people, to do the right thing. If you're a professional, you'll tick professional. If you're not professional, you're not going to tick professional. But he went, I am professional. So, he ticked it. And they didn't bat an eyelid, and they let it through, and So he had the worst ever score ever recorded at the British Open.
It has to be better than my score if I ever played there. But anyway, I'd love to hear what score he got.
It was 121. And
okay, that's pretty bad.
And apparently he lost 9 balls. So you could imagine the elitism at the British Open. You know, how happy they would be having someone of his caliber, or not of his caliber, playing. So so what they tried to do is they tried to stop him from playing. And so what they did, they went out to all golf clubs in the UK and said, if Maurice Flitcroft tries to join, you can't allow him to.
Oh, right. So they let him play the tournament, but then after that, they tried to ban him.
Well, they actually tried to ban him after 9 holes.
Oh, right.
But he basically just went, no, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. So he went around and, But what was really, really interesting is that he had an incredible following because, you know, you said all these people that have watched golf for a long time out there following the professionals where they see this numbnut just hitting it everywhere like they would be. And so they were on his side. So all these people were on his side.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing story because I'll tell you a couple of other little things about it as well. His sons are disco dancers. He had twin sons, they're disco dancers. And he always said they should follow their dreams, as he did at 46 and went and played at the British Open in 1976. But he said that they should go out and win the International World Championship of Disco Dancing.
Didn't know there was a thing, but
well, I had no idea there was that thing either. So they did do that. They went off and did that, and I can't tell you how that ends because then I'd be telling you too much. But this is a true story, and we watched the film that has only just been made the last few years, I think. And it's called Phantom of the Open. And the reason it's called Phantom of the Open is because what happened was when he got banned from playing in the British Open, he played in 1976. He came back in 1983 to play it again. But because he knew he was banned, he came back as Gerald Hoppy. He was meant to be this Swiss/Belgium French shocking accent. And a pretty bad golfer, but nowhere near as bad as it was the first time.
So he had 7 years of practice?
Well, he actually parred the first 2 holes.
Wow.
And
impressive.
Absolutely. And on the 3rd hole, he hit it within 10 meters of the pin.
Oh, wow.
But then he 6-putted.
Sounds like something I would do.
And that's how they realized that it was Maurice Flitcroft again. But that wasn't the only time. So he did that in 1983, and then at another time he came back as Gene Paychecky. And then Gene Paychecky, and then eventually he came back as an American golfer, professional golfer. And I won't explain to you why. You've got to see the film. It's worth seeing. It's fun. It's got a lot of heart, and it would be a what's on the box. But I just thought that when I saw the story and I saw it was true, I thought it was worth seeing great people that did stuff because he did do some really cool stuff. And what actually happened was he had a championship in Americas because, you know, America, they're not sort of, they don't, well, especially in those days, they weren't as elitist as, say, the British were. So they made their own tournament called I think it was called the Maurice Flitcroft Open or something.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, you get all these golfers out there to play for his tournament, as it were.
Is that still on there, do you think?
I apologize. What was that?
Do you think that tournament is still running with his name?
I believe it's I believe it still is to this day. I'm just trying to find. That's what it was. It was 1988, Blythefield Country Club in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Buddy Whitten, Blythefield's head pro, stated it started as a lark, but most people can't break 90, so they relate more to Morris than they would to a touring pro. By the time of the 22nd Morris G. Flitcroft member guest tournament, which was held in May 2000, the club had featured a green with 2 holes, so that even the most errant of approaches were potentially rewarded. If this wasn't enough, another green had a 12-inch 300-millimeter cup. That's 30 centimeters. That's awesome. That is so good.
Oh, dear.
That is so good. So, look, I'll play a little bit of the one thing I will show you is I'll show you his card. This is a card he had in America. Just show you some of his scores there. You can see that score on the end there.
70.
18 par 3. Thanks very much. So, and this guy's meant to be professional. So, but anyway, so I thought I'd just show you a little bit of the, here it is. I've got a little bit, it only goes for about a minute, but it's a bit of fun and well worth watching. It's called Phantom of the Open. Go out and see it. I think you can rent it on YouTube, and it might still be at the movies. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We've come outside to the studio car park to meet the man who shot a world record 121 at the British Open. He is the world's worst professional golfer.
No, sorry, I don't agree with that. I'm not the world's worst golfer, and I'm willing to prove it.
Okay, great. So we have set up a little golf course here in the car park.
Yeah, it's not a golf course, it's a putting green.
Great. It's exciting, isn't it? Oh, now that was close.
Yeah, I missed. Even though it's a 6-inch hole.
So,
correct.
that could be a little bit Oh, now, you feel that you should be let back into the Open, is that right?
Yes, an Open Championship, should be open to everyone, like the FA Cup. Give the little teams a chance.
No, that's what's not. It's not like that, Morris. Not at all.
Open. Well,
think of the fans.
Car park is a bit lopsided. So. Well, I think I'd best hand back to the studio. Thank you to the fantastic Morris Flitcroft, the world's worst golfer.
No, I'm not the world's worst golfer. I don't agree with that.
Oh, dear.
I love that. No, I'm not the worst. I don't agree with that.
Don't take me with those words. I'm an okay golfer.
Anyway, it's called Phantom of the Open. Highly recommend. A lot of fun. Very good.
Awesome. Keep an eye out on that one.
Yes.
Well, tonight I'm going to talk about an Australian pioneer. Although he didn't invent this concept or come up with a concept, he did commercialize this groundbreaking device that has helped hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. I'm talking about Professor Graham Clark, who invented and commercialized the bionic ear, or more accurately known as the cochlear
implant. Yeah, I knew when you said Graham, I knew in my head I had heard it, but I couldn't for the life of me remember.
Yeah, I forgot his name. I do remember it was an Australian invention, and there were some other pioneers before him who had for example, there were 2 French researchers, Charles Eries and Andre Junot, who gave detailed descriptions of the effects of directly stimulating your auditory nerves with electricity, or as way back as in 1957. So there was a gap there, but Professor Graham Clark from the 60s, he'd been studying and researching otolaryngology, I think is how you pronounce it, which is basically the ear, nose and throat surgery.
Right.
So he was researching how the human brain responds to coded sound or stimulated sound. He did a 1969 PhD, which focused on ways on how to improve, restore, and how to introduce hearing to patients. So even if you're completely deaf or you're born deaf, he was already studying how to make those people hear again. So he studied different ways of introducing electric stimuli into the auditory nerve, but it took about 10 years from his PhD to create this small device called the cochlear implant. And it was in 1978 that the first recipient received the cochlear implant at Melbourne's Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, which I think is on Victoria Street.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. Yeah, my friend my friend works in that area.
Yeah,
in the cochlear implant area.
Yeah, there you go. So the patient's name was Rod Saunders, and he received a multi-channel cochlear implant, and his first words that he heard was "Hello, Rod." So you can only imagine. Yeah, so you can only imagine how he would have felt emotionally and happy and yeah. So can only imagine.
I reckon I don't know. I'd imagine the first thing you would do is just cry. You just have tears streaming down your face. If you actually heard someone call your name, that would be incredible. Mind you, though, how would you know? I suppose you'd have to have it written down, wouldn't you? I'm not trying to be silly here. It's just, when you've got all your senses, you forget how you can use other ones type thing.
Yeah. So he obviously would have known his name and everything else and who and what he was doing or what was happening around him. But yeah, just to be able to hear those words would have been amazing. And I'm assuming, just like you and I, you can still feel the vibrations when people are talking.
Have you ever had conversations or worked with people with cochlear implants?
No, but I did know someone back in the early 90s when I was at uni and my parents had a milk bar. For those who aren't familiar with milk bars, in New South Wales, they're called delis, I think.
Oh, really?
Kiwis call them delis. Don't know what they call them here in Queensland, but they're basically small mini supermarkets.
They're just like a little. It's just like a little. Yeah, it's like a tiny little IGA that doesn't have anywhere near as much stuff.
Yeah, just run by mum and dad, which was me, my parents. Yeah. But I remember
sometimes you get fish and chips.
Sometimes, yeah. But back then, when I was going to uni, one of the customers was a guy who was a few years older than me at the time. Well, quite a bit actually. But he found out that he was working with cochlear implants at Melbourne Uni doing research, and so we became friends, and then we started playing squash together. And I can't remember all the stories he told me or what he was researching, but that's the closest I've gotten to someone who worked or has a cochlear implant. Interestingly enough, though, this guy, his father is an author and does Ned Kelly biographies.
Graham Clark or Ron Saunders?
No, this guy that I used to play squash with.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, so his father. So so I got to become friends with him and got to know his parents and his father, who's the author who did Ned Kelly stories, and his name is Ian Jones. I still remember his name, and Peter was his son's name. But yeah, it was good times.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I did actually work with someone with a cochlear implant for a while.
Did you?
Yeah, it was interesting because one day they didn't have one, and then the day after that they did.
Right. And did you notice any difference in the way he spoke, or how he obviously would have felt differently? But
oh yeah, I mean he was profoundly deaf. Might have been a girl actually. I think it was a long time ago. I think they were definitely profoundly deaf. I remember that. And when they had the cochlear implant, they mumbled a little, but it was amazing. It was amazing to hear their voice. You know, it was amazing to hear what they could, you know, they and now they could actually hear my voice as well, and you know, their mum and all the rest of it. And I actually spent quite a lot of time talking to her afterwards. You know, but she would get tired, and I said, look, if you are, just make sure you tell me, sort of thing. It's just I'm really fascinated by you know, what's happened, and obviously so happy, and I'm just, you know, really interested. But
did she talk much prior to that?
No, not as much. She didn't socialize as much either. But afterwards, yeah, she started socializing a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's just
life changing.
Absolutely life changing. And so, Professor Graham Clark, thumbs up to you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
Magnificent. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Have you got anything else there you need to finish off? Because
there's heaps more I could talk about this guy. But yeah, he was the first one to commercialize the implants. And the last thing I'll say about him is most people around the world who do receive cochlear implants come from his company that is based in Sydney. So, yeah.
Which is fantastic news. That's really, really good.
Exactly.
That it's an Australian first. That's good.
Yeah. Oh, and it was government backed too back then, back in the early 80s when that went commercial. So remember the days when government used to support innovation,
proper science, inventions, and innovation.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Remember that?
Yeah, I think those are the days when Barry Jones was what we call science minister.
Yes, when we used to have one. We haven't had one in 20 years or more.
That was the last one.
Oh, so shit. When was that? 90s?
Well, yeah. He was, I'm pretty sure he was Minister for Science in Hawke's government or in Keating's government. I can't remember. Could be both. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So early 90s.
Yeah, 90, maybe 93, 94 would be the last time. So that's a long, long time ago.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's terrible. Isn't it? Shocking. Yep. Shocking. Something that is not shocking is the fact that Dan will be with us for our 100th episode. 100th.
Yeah, so get the party poppers out.
That's it. We're gonna have to get some. I'll have to get some balloons behind me, although you won't see them because I've got this background. Maybe I'll just get a background that's got balloons.
Yeah, do that.
maybe that's the way to do it. But we'll have to think about that. We'll have to get happy hundreds across here or something in our banner behind us.
Yeah,
how are we going
to work on it? We'll work on it.
Talk to you about it. I have to talk about it. Anyway. Fantastic as usual. I will see you next week for Dan Illick. Join us live. It should be an absolute cracker. Potty will be out probably any time from Thursday onwards. Just keep an eye on your podcast catches.
Yep.
And good night, people.
All right, good night, and thank you, Dr. Marija, once again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, adios.
See you soon. All.